Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the AIIM Growth Partners podcast. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Stephen Shugert, the CEO and founder of Morphos AI. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Welcome. Hi, David. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
No, it's my absolute pleasure. And I know we've had a good conversation off air, so I think there's so many topics I'm looking forward to kind of exploring and unpacking here on the episode with you. But I guess by way of a bit of an introduction, can you give the listeners a bit of a background on yourself and explain, what Morphos AI does as well, please?
Yes, absolutely. AI came about at the advent of the large language models like ChatGPT-3 when it came out. And as we were serving our customers and incorporating AI in their businesses, we found out that there was a massive barrier to entry when it came to the amount of information that companies had and how they could make it AI ready. And we saw that it was really only the very large enterprises that had the budget and the teams to be able to convert that. So when we brought our brilliant engineers together, they came up with a solution that definitely transformed what that data pipeline process looked like and essentially enabled a more economic and more optimized way of having your raw data converted into an AI-ready state. That could be for agents, that could be for a knowledge base, any kind of agentic workflow. You always kind of need that brain, that data sort of vectorized information. And that's really what we focused on. And we've been in the process of building what we kind of just call the easy button of that data pipeline so that anyone, whether it's a small business, startup, or enterprise, can plug and play this technology, connect their raw data sources, and have it be filtered and processed into an AI-ready state that is more optimal and more scalable than any of the current options that are available on the market. And be that compression, quantization, and all of those things, whether it's on the data side or the index side.
AI-ready data state. What we mean by this specifically, I think there's a lot of businesses that are harvesting a lot of data out there. It's this concept of getting their data AI ready. What does that mean?
If we boil things, if we take a step back at what this whole ecosystem kind of looks like, you have to think about what language does AI speak in? Because I think we all, to a degree, can see the value of using this technology, incorporating a business context or even in a personal context, and the value of having these models connect with your own information or your business's information. The fact of the matter is, though, that due to the language that these AI models speak in, the data that we have right now, whether it's in data lakes or just like in a database or PDFs, whatever that might be, it can't necessarily read that right away. There has to be a conversion process, we'll say a manicuring process of that raw information so that it can be molded into a language that the AI model can actually understand and interact with. What's fascinating about this, as compared to other ways, is that in a traditional database, it's very much, I'm boiling this down, very much like rows and columns like in an Excel spreadsheet. But when it's in an AI-ready state, the coolest part about this is that each piece of information is transformed in a way where it has a relationship with all of the other pieces, meaning that it doesn't just flow into the standard rows and column format, but it's organized in a more multidimensional space. The term that is used in the market right now, they're vectors, meaning that they're mathematical vectors in space that each have a relationship. The word we call is semantic relationship between each of the components. What's cool about this is that the nature of these large language models is that they understand intrinsically, and this is how they're trained, what the relationship of each of the words are or the different concepts. So if you think about a word cloud, just think like a dog park, for example. Dog, woof, bone, water, play. It's a word cloud of everything that's semantically associated with it. This is intrinsic in a large language model, and that's how it knows to predict the next best word based on those relationships. Now, when you pair that with your own information, what's fascinating, what's exciting for us is that it can reveal patterns and relationships that we weren't previously aware of. So that conversion process transforms your normal data in a variety of ways, and you're able to store it into one multidimensional relational space so that when you have the large language model, be it ChatGPT or whatever you want, it can understand the relationships between everything. So based on whatever your question is about what's going on, it can find and extract the most relevant components, and then you get the kind of insights that make those big business decisions or massive insights what they be. I hope that makes sense.
So if I'm kind of understanding this correctly, I know we've not spoken about unstructured data specifically, but your manicuring process, I like that. So we're going to stick with that if that's okay. You're taking this data, getting it, you're kind of cleaning it, sprucing it up a little bit, and you're making it, ready for the AI agent, or making it ready for AI to actually make sense of. Mentioned semantics. So, making meaning or attributing actually meaning to this data. So it's not just a collection of now structured data. You actually can start making these sort of inferences, and I guess allowing AI to do these predictions, based on this sort of like classification and stuff.
You're right on the money, man. That's exactly it.
Fantastic. I mean,
That's
I'll retire.
exactly
I'll
it.
retire
There
now.
you go.
I'll retire now then. Fantastic. Well, that was lucky. So looking ahead then at specific business use cases then, because I think, a lot of businesses out there will be using at quite a elementary level, be using kind of chat GPT. They might be using kind of note takers. They might be using these AI things. So what does this and what does kind of Morphus AI then really, cleansing this data, making it AI ready? What does that enable businesses to do then at a high level?
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question, and one that's very important to bring up, because even within for example, the technology for creating these vector databases, as they're called, has actually been around long before large language models came out. They were very, very common and used in the machine learning space. And with the advent of large language models, they have exploded in popularity. And you've seen big startups such as like Pinecone, Weaviate, Quad, all start to pop up out of nowhere, right? To accommodate this surge. Here's the main thing. When you have, let's just say that you have 1 gigabyte of raw data, and you want to convert it into an AI-ready state. That conversion process, now there's a few variables there. I'm going to gloss over. This is a high level. It can essentially double, if not 10x the size when it's in the AI-ready state. That's that process, because you're essentially converting the raw data into a multi-dimensional format. There's a lot of, depending on what models you're using to convert that in dimensions, there's nuance there. That's where it pays to have a good AI engineering team or consultant to illuminate what the best strategy is. But the biggest value here is that conversion process takes a lot of resources. The conversion can take time. It can be expensive. And when you have massive databases that are just, thousands of gigabytes, if not petabytes, your accuracy, the accuracy upon which, so the AI connects to your database, and when it pulls this stuff, it can have inaccuracies that we've all had the situation where ChatGPT will tell us something very confidently, absolutely this. And then we're like, that wasn't right. It's like, oh, my apologies. You're still right. That's something that is a huge problem in the industry right now. Massive problem for every single company. I mean, a research paper just came out from Apple highlighting how the rise of these reasoning models that everyone's coming out with, like OpenAI's O3, Claude's Sonnet, and Opus models and more, that they're actually not necessarily reasoning, and that the accuracy of what they're saying digresses the more complex the issue is. The more it has to reason and go through these subprompts, it becomes less accurate, right? You pair that with having to search through a petabyte size vector database that is maybe constantly updating. It's a very dangerous place when you're making what you think are data-driven decisions. So this is why at Morphos, we created this product Monarch that optimizes that experience so that we essentially get our algorithm that we're using to clean up that data pipeline is in a lot of ways getting rid of the noise of the data, the duplicates, the relationships that don't necessarily make sense or aren't in congruence with business value. And what that leaves you with is a more streamlined, more efficient vector database that now the models can interact with. And the outputs that you're going to get are going to be much more reliable. And most importantly, for a lot of different companies, the speed upon which you get your answers will be a lot quicker. So long story short, the solution optimizes the data, cleans it up in such a way that you only have what you need without all of the excess, so that you save on infrastructure costs, which are steadily rising, and you have more reliable searches, which is paramount. That's how you build trust in all of this. And the latency upon which you can search and get your responses is also shorter. So quicker responses, more accurate, less cost bill to, your AWS or your GCP, whoever you're using.
Mm, mm.
In a lot
Interesting.
of ways, the main goal of this was to how can we convert this absolutely necessary conversion process and to democratize it so that anyone that is wanting to incorporate AI can start to use this without having to pay a super hefty bill.
And how might be a bit of a stupid question, but how do you distill and condense that data down into what's necessary and what's useful? How do you make those sort of classifications and know, what's just garbage, what's just filling up the pipeline, and what's actually the juicy, the useful stuff?
It's a great question. And that goes into the heart of the algorithm that our engineers created so that when the data comes through, there's an automatic, we call it like a faceting process, meaning that based on the information that's coming through, there's a collaboration with the business team on what is relevant, what is actually important that you're looking for, and that can automatically be extracted from the data. So it's almost categorized to a degree. And then there's an intelligent weighting model that comes in and dynamically understands what is the most important data based off of the business metrics. So it's a collaboration between, we're using technology, collaborating with the business and leadership team to come out with high quality, high impact results for your AI systems that allow you to scale at a significantly more efficient rate than with any other vectorization platform available. So there's a lot of math involved in that whole process, a lot of algorithms. It's a very mathematical process because at the end of the day, that's what computers and AI are at its core. But there's a lot of intelligent understanding of the data, prioritizing what's accurate dynamically, and mapping that to real business priorities. Because at the end of the day, that's the goal. The technology is meant to serve that, and that's what we came to build.
Interesting. Well, thanks for sharing that. And back to, one of the issues in the report you mentioned before, specifically looking about a lot of these models. And I think I read that as well, and was saying they're not actually much more than just a predictive capability. It's like, let's follow a pattern and predict what's coming next. They've not actually got that reasoning ability. You mentioned the problem with not actually giving accurate answers. If I'm not mistaken, it's hallucinations, I think, is the term people use
That's
to.
correct. Yeah.
What's the benefit of large language models over, a small language model approach?
I love that you brought this question, and that dives deep into the heart of what does AI look like in an enterprise production environment. I honestly love this topic. So first off, for anyone that doesn't know, if you are a business owner of any kind and you're looking to incorporate AI, something that you have to understand right off the bat is that anytime you or your team or anyone writes a prompt or interacts with the AI, there is a charge to that. Okay. There's a charge that it's measured in what's called tokens, and there is an input token and an output token. All that means is that you're being charged to put in a prompt, and you're being charged to receive the output of that prompt. That happens all in the background if you're using Claude or Gemini or Grok or ChatGPT. You don't see that because you're paying for like the $20 a month plan or the $200, whatever. But when you incorporate AI in an actual business, you're not just using ChatGPT, you're actually incorporating it. You're creating infrastructure to connect and run with your stuff. A lot of times you can think of these, they're called frontier models. So if you're in the OpenAI space, their O3 model, or as of today, June 12th, they're coming out with O3 Pro. That's a frontier model. Think of that as like a McLaren P1, super hypercar. It's a hypercar, is very high performing. It's meant to do almost anything and everything at the highest level. Same goes for Claude's Opus 4. Think of that as another hypercar, right? So we have that frame. We understand those frontier models. They're like the hypercars of the world. Let's go into a scenario where you incorporated AI for your customer support team, and they need to search a quick problem on how to solve a technical issue. You don't necessarily need a hypercar to answer such a simple thing. It's a very expensive cost. And when you do this at scale, you can only imagine how the costs just exponentially increase. Thus, the advent of small language models. The mini models, as they're called. OpenAI has their 4.0 mini, which is really good. Their O4 mini models, which are fantastic as well. The best part of this use case, and there's been some research done on this, is that when you use a mini model, and you have a really well-written and structured system. Think of it like, what's the persona? What are the guardrails? And you connect that to an optimized AI-ready information. We call those vector databases. In a lot of cases, it can outperform a frontier model that's not necessarily connected to anything. And at the same time, you are getting, it's at a fraction of the cost. Now, I want to note here that we're mentioning a lot of different names of a lot of different AI models. And the only ones that I've mentioned are from private companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Gemini, and whatnot. But there's a massive resurgence of the open source models like Mistral and others. What that means is that you can, if you have the hardware, if you have like servers available to you, you can run them locally and you're not having to pay or send any of your information to OpenAI or Anthropic or anything. So a lot of those, since, for example, like the O3 model, you need data centers to power this bad boy. It is power hungry. It loves electricity. We've all seen the news, right? With these small language models, specifically the open source ones, it is becoming a lot more prevalent to self-host and run them locally. So you invest in a server rack and some hardware that can run it. And now you have your own private model that you're not having to pay. You know, it can scale up to thousands, if not tens of thousands or more, hundreds, in just those tokens that I was mentioning earlier. So at the end of the day, it comes down to how can we understand what are the business needs? What are the actual needs? What problems are we solving? How can we use and understand this technology to best solve those problems and create an infrastructure that can scale with that business? And that'll involve a combination of small language models that can take care of the smaller tasks and more frontier models that maybe are needed for more complex operations. The last note I want to make on this is Apple already showcased this, I think last year on the updated iPhones, because they have their own version of Apple Intelligence locally on the iPhone, which I think it's a variation of a small language model. But if the prompt or the query is too complex, it'll say, hey, how about we run this on ChatGPT instead? So that's the perfect consumer-based example of that kind of agent ecosystem, small working with large, and that just maps out to any other more enterprise setup.
And why? It sounds like a simple question. I'm sure there's probably a much more technical answer, so it might not be a simple question. Why is a simple language model able to say, I don't know the answer, ask ChatGPT, but a large language model will hallucinate?
That's a good question. I'm not going to claim to be a large language model expert, nor at the end of the day, we can look at Anthropic, for example. Anthropic is the creator of the large language model Claude. And what I really appreciate about their business is that they're very research focused, meaning that the neural nets and at the end of the day, these GPT models, what they stand for is generative pre-trained transformer. So ChatGPT is essentially chatting with a generative pre-trained transformer. So really quick, generative, it's generative AI. It's creating stuff. It's generating stuff for us. The pre-trained, we've all seen that these models, they're trained on billions amounts of information and all of the internet up to a point. So they're finite. And then the transformer model, that's what I want to highlight on. That's essentially the backbone of what lets this all happen. And Google actually came up with this technology a few years ago, and everyone started to use it and create these models. That's how they work. In some ways, they are still a bit of a black box. And a lot of research is being done to decipher what that is. Anthropic is one of the big ones. There's more, and there's universities, MIT and Columbia. They're all diving in. It's still something that is being researched. We know of ways to mitigate it. There's certain prompt engineering strategies that you can use to mitigate. I think the old CEOs of Google, Sergey Brin, I think, famously said that they work really well if you threaten them. If you say, hey, if you are hallucinating, you're going to get fined X amount of dollars or whatever. I've tested this and it can be beneficial. But other ways of mitigating hallucination are, again, if you can prompt effectively and you can ground some information in what we call truth, meaning that AI database, that vector database, if the large language or small language model can reference direct pieces of information from there, it reduces the risk of hallucination. So we're still not at a 0% rate that's still being worked on. We are at very much like 99 point in a lot of pieces.
Yeah.
Think healthcare, for example. If you had AIs analyzing radiology reports, for example, or images, you need to know that they're accurate. If a doctor is going to make a decision on a person, you need 100% accuracy. So it's evolving, the technology is evolving, the research and the understanding of the neural networks within the transformer model, how that works. It's a process. So right now, that's the core of the technology, and the world is building infrastructure around it to mitigate it. But I'm sure in next week or next month or next year, we're going to see updates in how these models perform, how they run, and how they are trained and built, that we might get to a point where there is nothing. There are no hallucinations at all.
And this is a loaded question, so I guess kind of forgive me in a selfish question probably. But you've spoken about your business and kind of what your capability is, and I think it's quite interesting because something I've kind of found myself is everyone wants to put you in a bucket. So I want to know, what kind of bucket are you putting yourself in? When you're reaching out to businesses, and it's not just we're kind of polishing your data and making it AI ready. You're probably kind of pitching, business outcomes and business solutions. So talk to me a little bit around that, how you kind of position yourself and what your kind of messaging is, if you're happy to share.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. We essentially enable the scaling of AI infrastructure. At the end of the day, what we provide is a more seamless transition of and connection of your unstructured, disorganized data, combine it into an AI-ready state that is optimized, flexible, dynamic, and can connect to any AI or agentic software that you have, and can scale to such a degree that it's you can't compare it to any other platform that's out there.
Well, that's why I think, and that's why I said it's a bit loaded and a bit of a selfish question, because it's something I'm kind of grappling with myself, and we've spoken with off air that, I speak to a load of people that brand themselves as digital transformation kind of experts, and that's digital transformation, something that's been about for, decades, or at least, years, decades even. You also then have vendors. You spoke about, how you're created your own kind of custom, proprietary sort of algorithms. You got your tool coming out, but you're not a vendor. You're not a consultancy. So I find it's sort of interesting, because something I'm grappling with myself, as I mentioned, is trying to sort of, in this new age, new era, how you position yourself in the market, I guess, is probably going to be a big determinant of whether you win or whether you fail. And I think it's really interesting and insightful understanding how businesses are sort of doing that, and what's resonating as well.
I agree. It has been a learning process
Mm.
in how we position ourselves, because at the end of the day, we offer a technology that's used for builders. So right now, we're seeing a massive growth in popularity with what's called vibe coding, essentially non-technical people that can, when they set up the right systems on their computer with Cursor or Windsurf or whatever, they can communicate with the AI and create software that previously you needed full teams to build, and months and hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we're building, just like with Legos, you have different types of Legos and they interconnect in different ways. We build an optimized Lego piece that is a fundamental part of AI infrastructure.
Mm. Mm.
And it's about getting, developers and builders to integrate that, to use that, and to allow the solutions with what they build. Again, the name of the game is, again, scalability, accuracy, and reliability. Those are three pillars that our product really stands on. And we are only going to need to convert information, more and more information, into an AI-ready state. The CEO of NVIDIA famously said, I think last year at one of their conferences, like, vectorize all of your data. That's like the word. We're vectorizing the data. We're only going to see more of that. And the costs are only going up. The energy consumption is only going up. And this is our way of using human innovation to combat that in a way.
What are your thoughts on the roles of humans and kind of AI, and what displacement is going to happen?
Yeah, I'd love to dive into that. But one note on the vibe coding thing, you can't compare a vibe coder to a real software developer. We're talking about two different playing fields, and someone who fundamentally understands system and software architecture versus relying on an AI to do it all for you. I think what I love about it is that it's an evolving field, and it allows people to unlock their creativity and to be able to bring something to the world that was previously inaccessible. I'm all for it. I'm all for vibe coding for sure, but it doesn't exist in a production environment. A production environment requires a lot more rigorous testing, security. It's a whole different playing field.
Mm.
So you're going to see those two kind of tiers of developers. So just to clarify on that one component.
Do you think there is a fear and a risk that people will start to devalue, the true work, the rigorous work, and the really kind of integral work that you're nodding along here that the developers are doing because vibe coding is an option?
Amazing insight, David. Amazing insight. I'm seeing this every day. Every day when I'm speaking with different founders, different decision makers, they're like, well, AI is doing it all anyway. And it's like are a lot of misconceptions on what the capabilities are of AI, and more importantly, where it falls short. There's a series I'm actually building right now on demystifying AI, because there are so many misconceptions, like what you're mentioning right there. Why do I need a software team if I can, hire, Joe Schmo here for X amount and can just build it all myself? Could you? Absolutely, to a point. And if you do any research on this, you'll see that people who have been vibe coding solutions, there are glaring security issues. Glaring. The infrastructure strategy is meant for proof of concept. I think it is a great method to go and build rapid MVPs, proof of concepts. I'm all for that. When you want to build something that is to be set up in a production environment with goals of like thousands of people, if not hundreds of thousands of people using this, it needs to be a lot more robust. And that's something where vibe coding is not there yet. So there's a lot of education that has to happen, which is why I'm glad that we're having this conversation to bring to the awareness of different decision makers and founders that it's not a one-to-one thing. There's immense value in having knowledgeable software engineers on your team, and you pair them with the vibe coding capabilities, it's unstoppable. It's unstoppable. It's a very powerful force. And I'm excited to see how that raises the bar of how we deliver software in the years to come.
Amazing. Well, thanks for that insight, and thanks, I guess, kind of for the correction that kind of prompted that. Yeah, what are your thoughts around, and what are you seeing in the market regarding, people trying to sort of replace people with AI? Is that leading the agenda?
Well, I mean, we've seen interesting posts. For example, the CEO of Duolingo sent out a memo recently that's been very polarizing for people. We saw the layoffs from Microsoft, 7,000 people at least. And I mean, it's just the beginning, right? So I want to frame this first we first have to acknowledge that with any kind of technology, any kind of thing that the human race makes, it's going to have an upside and a downside. It's always a double-edged sword. Those are sort of the things that we create, and AI is no different. We are seeing the media loves to highlight the downsides because it's polarizing. People respond to elevated emotions. So from a psychological standpoint, we can understand why that's getting more news coverage. My personal philosophy is, one, acknowledging that is a double-edged sword, but empowering people on the demystification of what AI is, how they can start to learn it and use it for themselves, and how it is only a win scenario when you start to understand just the fundamentals. So yes, jobs will be replaced. And we can see that as a downside, but the upside that we are maybe not seeing yet is that other jobs will be created. So think about this, right? Right now, the AI models that we have are not good autonomously. They don't run very well when you just let them be and do their thing. To a small degree, they can be effective, and we're getting better at that orchestration, that agentic orchestration process. But it is still very important to have human in the loop, people that can manage and use these tools. So as AI increases and it begins incorporated into the common workplace, people will still need to be hired and employed to drive those AI machines. Now, if you think about things in like 120 or 200 years into the future, I don't know. I'm gonna vote for the Star Trek era, where it's not Terminator. If we think the two sides, like Terminator's worst case scenario, Star Trek's the best case scenario, I'm gonna shoot for the Star Trek scenario, where we have to work and we do things out of living in purpose and alignment. And how can we continue to benefit humanity and the people around us? That's the boat I'm on. But it will be a transition process, and it'll be a big education process for everyone involved. the companies that are removing the jobs, the ones that are adding them, and the upskilling process for the people who aren't. Just think about the, customer service rep. That's one of the main jobs that is being replaced right now. AI voice agents are so good that they can handle all the conversations. They'll never get angry or frustrated or anything, and have expert knowledge on whatever they're trained on. 24/7. It's hard to compete. So what does that mean? The best example I like to give is in the customer success space, meaning that that's in a post-sale space where you have customers who are already in your ecosystem, and it's a more of like a white glove approach where you have a human, a person that is connecting with you, the owner, on how the integration is going, is it working as you wanted and whatnot. I believe that just to human behavior and patterns of how we evolve and adopt technology, the pendulum is going to swing in a way where we are going to want to AI everything. Let's go all extreme and AI everything. That will have its benefits, its explorations, and some serious pain points and downfalls. That means that we are going from there to swing back. The goal here is to hit a neutral point where we balance both, where AI is used like salt on a dish, tastefully, where needed, and people are going to begin to value human interaction a lot more. So I think roles like the customer success manager, for example, are going to become a lot desirable in companies, and people will want to pay more to interact with a human being instead of a highly sophisticated AI. That's where I believe we are going to go, because at the end of the day, people want to connect with people. Humans do business with humans. It's that emotional, it's that personal connection that we all strive for. So no matter how technology gets, again, you'll have your outliers. You have both ends of the spectrum in terms of over-reliance, under-reliance. But our mission, my mission, is to help guide people to that balance point.
Where do you think we are on the pendulum right now?
We are swinging towards AI, all of the things, cut everything. Let's see where it fails. Let's see where it breaks. Humanity is I'm optimistic. Despite what's going on in the world and everything, I'm optimistic. I think that it's part of our evolutionary process where we sometimes need to put our hand on the stove and get burnt and learn those lessons. Hopefully, it only happens once. You don't have to repeat it. And hopefully we maintain the balance with the world around us. But that's where I think humanity is going. And the more that we can empower people and demystify this technology and increase adoption in more efficient, economic, and eco-friendly ways, those are the ways that will lead to a more fruitful adoption of this technology. Because don't get me wrong, it will take over every aspect of reality. It will eventually, 100%. In the homes, we see all the smart cities that are being built. It's in our phones. It's going to be on our operating systems. Microsoft is already on that. It'll be in our refrigerators, understanding what we're putting in, what needs to be, communicated and whatnot, what we're low on, our TVs. It's going to be everywhere. And the more that we can stay on top of it and understand the limitations of AI, that's the biggest thing. Where does it fall short? I think that's going to lead to a more intentional adoption and less fear mongering in the media.
And I guess it's a bit of a curveball question, but not in the sense that we're staying with the same sort of theme. But as you mentioned there, we're becoming increasingly connected. You talked about smart cities, smart devices. We've all got smart devices plugged in the home, whether it's a smart kettle, smart fridge, smart whatever. It seems we're more kind of connected digitally than ever. With AI, we've now got the capability of further distancing ourselves from human beings. We can be in the hopefully soon we'll be in the metaverse. We'll be operating there. We're on social media. We're on our phones. We're communicating with all these apps. Yeah, it seems actually from a spiritual level, we actually couldn't be further, apart and further disconnected. You mentioned how we're going to have that great reset when the pendulum swings backwards and, we achieve balance. But how do you think amongst all this noise and I guess this fear mongering, for want of a better phrase, and all this kind of negativity around there, how do you think people in this sort of day and age can maintain that sort of purpose when there's so much up in the air and uncertainty around?
It's a great question. I think it all boils down to, let's just take a step back, right? We have the rapid evolution of technology before us. It's beginning to integrate into our everyday lives. So how do we as humans stay grounded in that? If I boil it down to one word, presence. How can we as people be? How can we just simply be and redefine the relationships that we have with our technology, with our careers, with our jobs, with our friends, with our spouses, at the end of the day, The human experience is one based on relationships. Everything, every dimension in our life is founded on what is your relationship with the other thing and what is your relationship with yourself. What does that mean? When we are too attached to what's going on and the uncertainty or the instability of what this may or may not cause, our minds are thinking into the future, and that creates anxiety because it's something that we can't control. That's basic psychology. When you're thinking about the future, it hasn't happened yet, and our instinctual limbic brain is thinking about survival. So it's going to be thinking about worst case scenarios. That's how we're programmed. When you practice being more present, more embodied in who you are and what you're doing, and just being, you have a moment to redefine what that relationship is. So for me, yes, it could go down the Terminator path, but it doesn't have to, it can be something different. You get to define that. The defining of that process, of that evolution, happens right now. Not worrying about what may or may not happen, freezing you from taking any action, and now life is happening to you instead of life happening for you. So presence is a big one. I mean, how do we practice that in a world where everything is so alarming and everything? It involves a bit of, disconnecting from what your digital diet is. So think about, what social media accounts are you following? What post are you finding that you are creating like an elevated emotion in? It's all this sort of stuff. Like, how can I build in a lot of ways, a more pure relationship with the world around me so that I have the opportunity to be more centered, to redefine my relationships with the world around me, and then begin to act in a more authentic and embodied way. And what does that lead to? It leads to living a more inspired and purpose-driven life. Because instead of doing all of the things that society is telling you should be doing, you are intrinsically taking action on your highest values, whatever those may be. For you, David, you have your own set. I mean, you creating this podcast and finding the connections like myself and others that, we resonate with those similar values. You're attracting those people into your sphere. Just like right before we started this podcast, we were talking about another contact that reached out, that they are somehow, so you're in the UK and I'm here in the United States in Arizona. Somehow they're also from Arizona, and I was there at one of their pitch competitions.
I thought you had connected us, and I reached out to him saying that I presumed you had connected us, which you hadn't. So yeah.
Yeah. So I think at the end of the day, life is a lot more than what we can see and sense with our limited, human senses. There's a mystical component. Different philosophies, different religions have different words to describe this, but it's undeniable that there is there's something that's more out there that unifies us. And the more that we can be more centered in who we are and understand who we are more and understand how we connect with others, that will be the foundation that leads to not only mental resilience, but spiritual resilience as well.
I love that. And I wanted to kind of distill it down. It's doing a bit of a disservice, but essentially, if I were to find your meaning, focus on the present, focus on the relationships with others, relationship with yourself, and relationship with the world around you, is that kind of summed it up?
That's it. That's really what it comes down to, man.
Fantastic. Well, no, I appreciate you sharing that. And I appreciate what you shared on here. I think it's, as I said, even before the podcast here, is taking the opportunity sometimes to kind of slow down. And sometimes it's others that kind of force you to do that and kind of realize how far you've come. It's so easy to focus on the day-to-day grind, focus on the news that's around there and all the negativity that is inevitably forced upon us by kind of media, by the news, by whatever. And actually sometimes taking a moment, slowing down, being present is the greatest kind of reset and the greatest kind of present or privilege you can kind of give yourself.
I couldn't agree more. Again, just like you said, like, love your neighbor how you love yourself, right? Jesus said it best.
I love that. Well, look, Stephen, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast today. We've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and I've learned so much, and I appreciate you entertaining and kind of humoring some of my questions where I was trying to kind of keep up. So I've learned a lot, and I've taken a lot away from this episode, and no doubt the listeners have as well. So thank you.
You've been amazing, David. And thanks again for you, not even just inviting me, but having created this space to be able to share and explore these thoughts, because it's on a lot of people's minds. There's a lot of fear there, and there's a way out. There's definitely a way out. So thanks you to being the person to spearhead this.
Thank you. My absolute pleasure. Thank you, Stephen.